Thanks a lot, Brian. We appreciate you and LewerMark for your service. And so today we have just a few of us from, again, Howard University, as well as Tennessee State University, and myself being at Prairie View A&M University. We'll just be talking a bit about some of the work that we've been doing at our respective HBCUs. And so first, I'd like to introduce Ms. Tania Hope from Howard University, who will tell us about some of the work she's been working on.
Thank you, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? All right. So I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to try anyway. And so my name is Tania Hope. I am the director of the Ralph J. Bunch International Affairs Center at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I've been at Howard for almost 8 years now, and I'm also a PhD student in the Higher Education Leadership and Policy Studies program at Howard University in the School of Education. I just defended my dissertation proposal 1 month ago, and so what I'm going to focus my remarks on this afternoon are really about what I've been focusing my research on, which I know a number of you here are connected with me on LinkedIn or Facebook or somewhere, so you may have seen this already, but I am focusing my research on internationalization at HBCUs, and I have come up with a new framework that I'm offering for consideration that I am calling Black internationalization. And the premise for this is, I think many of us who are at HBCUs over the years, I've probably had conversations with you at some point, or you've had conversations with each other. And I think that we understand that internationalization, the way that we at HBCUs engage in internationalization is just a little bit different. And I wanted to figure out what the differences are. I wanted to hone in on what makes internationalization at our institutions unique. And so that's what I have set out to do. And I'm going to, is this moving forward? So as I said, I call it Black internationalization. I just made some slides just so you don't have to, stare into the abyss. But what I've offered is Black internationalization as an alternative framework for higher education internationalization. And is really based on the history of our institutions. So I think we all can agree that historically Black colleges and universities were created obviously created because we were not allowed to educate ourselves in other spaces, in white spaces. And so we created our own. And at the center of the creation of our institutions was a battle for social justice. It was a place for us to liberate ourselves through education. And I think that has maintained an essential part of HBCUs throughout generations. And I think that it influences significantly the way that we engage with the rest of the world. And what I have been researching for my dissertation has been, in the initial stages, how that has happened, how we have engaged with the world and why we have engaged with the world in the ways in which we have. And my colleague here on the call, Kathy Strohmeyer Golden from Mississippi Valley State, and I have had conversations about this, and she, I'm sure, is a wealth of information that she can expound on a number of these of these experiences. But I was really looking at how and why we have engaged in the world. And from the very beginning of our institutions, we have been connected to the world. Howard University had international students from China as early. Howard opened in 1867. In 1869, we had Chinese students who were enrolled at Howard. And I'm sure that there are stories like that at our institutions that perhaps we just don't know about, but eventually, hopefully, will be uncovered and acknowledged in an appropriate way. Let's see. Like I said, I don't have great slides. This is just because I had a slide with all the HBCUs, well, not all, but some of the HBCUs. These are some of the HBCUs that are represented here, that we work with, that I do stuff with, but really, this is how I see Black internationalization. So if we look at Black internationalism and we think of Black internationalism is a couple of things. It is a discipline where you could take courses in Black internationalism, but it's also a movement. So it is a movement of art, history, politics, etc. It is a conglomeration of a number of things that are all related to the world from a Black perspective. And if you take Black internationalism and you take HBCUs, I think the thing that ties those two things together is Black consciousness. And those feed into Black internationalization. The equity-driven lens, I'm not going to get into that too much here today, but that is a lens that Crystal George Mwangi from George Mason University and Christina Yao came up with, and it looks at internationalization through an equity-driven lens. And so I've incorporated into this conceptual framework. But I would highly encourage you all to go and check out. They've got an article, I think it's an article. It might be a chapter in a book, I can't remember, called The Equity-Driven Lens. There's also, they did a webinar last year. They talk all about it. It's very, very good. You should check it out. So that factors into it. And then critical internationalization, which is also a movement, I guess a movement of scholars led by Sharon Stein, who have taken to looking at internationalization through a much more critical lens, calling out internationalization for its neoliberal leanings, for its not quite equitable approaches, and so forth. And so all of these elements are what I'm using to come up with Black internationalization, because the thing that I think a lot of the literature does today, most of the literature, it approaches internationalization exclusively from the perspective of traditionally white institutions. And I use traditionally white institutions very intentionally, because higher education institutions in the United States of America were created to educate white men. And, and so many of those institutions continue to operate in the same essence. And so I call them traditionally white institutions, because they were not created for us. Historically, Black institutions were created for us. Traditionally, white institutions were not, and they continue to operate in that vein in many cases. So, so that is, I think I lost my place, but anyway, this is the framework that I operate from in terms of Black internationalization. And then these are the pillars that I have come up with that I'm still working through, because I haven't done my dissertation yet. And so this will bear out or not, but then there might be another one or two that are missing from here. Anyway, but for now, this is the framework, or these are the pillars that I think make up Black internationalization. I think that when we are at HBCUs are working with institutions abroad, I think that we are doing so in from a more collaborative space. I think we understand the limitations of our institutions at HBCUs because we have been historically under-resourced and underfunded. And so we have to be more creative about how we engage with partners. And oftentimes the partners that we engage with are equally under-resourced and underfunded. And so we have to figure out the best way for both of us to move forward with an understanding that, you know, our partners abroad may not fully understand the historical disparities that exist between their traditional partners in the US and HBCUs. But nevertheless, we figure out a way, and we always have figured out a way to engage in collaborative program design. Accessible pathways for international students. Historically speaking, I was surprised to learn that in the late 50s and early 60s, Howard actually had the largest international student population of any institution in the United States of America, which today, when we talk about international students, HBCUs don't even appear remotely near the levels of international students that are currently attending US institutions. Obviously, that is because in the late 50s and early 60s, international students weren't allowed to go to traditionally white institutions for the most part, especially if they were from Africa or the Caribbean. And so where did they go? They went to HBCUs. And as such, Howard had the largest population of international students in the country. That also was before US institutions realized that international students would pay a nice sum of money to attend our institutions. I think that HBCUs do not exploit, I will say exploit, the international student population in the same way that traditionally white institutions do. Granted, I think that there is an understanding that, yes, it is an additional revenue stream, but I think IIE recently shared some data with us. I think, Julie, that was at your session at the White House conference, that was showing that international students at HBCUs are much more significantly funded by the institution than by them paying tuition. And so that speaks to the support that HBCUs offer to international students to make a US education accessible for them as compared to other international students. So diverse destinations is referencing where our students decide to study abroad. Again, the IIE data that was recently shared at the White House Initiative on HBCU annual conference showed that our students, of the top 10 international destinations for US students to study abroad, the top 10 for traditionally white institutions, 7 of the top 10 are in Western Europe. For HBCU students, 4 of the top 10 are in Western Europe. Our students go to much more diverse places. So Ghana, so Spain was number 1, Ghana was the second highest destination for HBCU students. So diverse destinations, more equitable partnerships, and a curriculum that centers marginalized voices. And I think when we look at the history of HBCUs and international engagement, and we think about the field of international education today, and I would love to get into this conversation with those of you who are, on this webinar today, but I think that internet or the way that we have engaged with the world over generations speaks more to liberation struggles for people of African descent. And I think in the field of international education, we don't tend to use that language. The language that we use in the field is much more practitioner focused. It is more practical. I think that one of the things that sets us apart as HBCUs in terms of our international engagement, if you look historically with international students that came to HBCUs would tend to come from Africa and the Caribbean, and they were there at times when those were colonized places seeking liberation, and HBCUs were a place for the diaspora and people of African descent in the United States to come together, and they influence each other through the Black Power movement, through these liberation struggles in colonized spaces. And that's where the Black internationalism comes in, because it was all connected, and they all connected on the campuses of HBCUs. And I think that that is what drives, to a large extent, a lot of the interests of our institutions and of our students when, for example, selecting their destinations. They are looking for those connections and those ties to their heritage, to those struggles, to the liberation of Black people. Marcus, do you have a question, or am I running out, or am I out of time?
We're running out of time.
Okay, I'm done. So we'll just leave it right there, and we can talk later. So I'll leave that. Thank you.
Awesome. Much appreciated, Tania. Thanks for setting the tone for us and providing that historical context for us, and shedding a little light on some of the research that you've been doing in this space. And so next, I am going to ask Dr. Jewel Wynn from Tennessee State University to share some of her experience with us, particularly working with the international students and scholars. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for questions that you all can ask any of us who have presented today. But please take the floor, Dr. Wynn. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Tania, for sharing the historical perspective of HBCUs and some of your research. I think it's very important, but it's also a great segue into what I want to share today. But I want to just throw out a couple of caveats for us. I'm actually here in Argentina presenting with a group of researchers, and I always have interesting conversations when I'm traveling abroad and presenting at conferences, because 9 times out of 10, I'm the only one that looks like me. And it's troubling. And so one of the conversations that I had last night, the guy said, well, we need to do more with minority serving institutions. And I said, do you mean historically Black colleges or minority serving institutions? So the conversation went on to the point that he said, well, how are you all classified? And I said, well, we're an R2 institution and we are striving to be R1s. And then his response was, well, if you want to be an R1 and you are an R2, you need to learn how to play with R1s. And so these are the types of subtle remarks that are made oftentimes to HBCUs. And depending on your level of confidence, you may either become intimidated or you may feel like that was inappropriate for some of the remarks, but there is some truth to what they're saying. And I'm saying all that to say, traditionally, even though we've been doing study abroad and things like that at HBCUs, it is time for us to have a shift in our paradigm. Our institutional leaders must find a way to make internationalization priorities on our campus. We must find ways to make individuals who are on this call, if you're not already, senior international officers, and find a way to centralize our internationalization efforts on campus. Otherwise, we get lost among all the priorities on campus. So with that being said, I am very happy to share that me and two of my colleagues actually started the Office of Diversity and International Affairs on the campus of Tennessee State University in the spring of 2012. It was a journey because, of course, we didn't have any funding, but we were able to get the previous president to give us some funding to get started. So we started with myself as the executive director. I had just finished the SIO Academy, the Senior International Officer Academy, and I also was the CDO. So all of those roles were combined. And I brought in an individual who is on the call with us today, Mark Brinkley, who served as the Director for International Education and Global Learning, because he had the experience of leading study abroad programs and brought a wealth of knowledge. And then another individual who was the PDSO on our campus, the primary designated school official, that would help with the ISSS side, the International Student Scholar Services side. So we struggled through our first couple of years. We were able to increase the international student population by 800%, and that was because of the Saudi student population. Today, the Saudi students are still the largest population, with Nigeria second and Nepal third. We have been fortunate enough to have some creative initiatives occur. For example, our students who study abroad, everyone feeds into a fund that is called an international education fee, and that creates a pot of money for students to apply for grants to go study abroad. But on the International Student and Scholar Services side, what has been creative is that our president gave us $1 million this year to provide what we call an international tuition assistance grant. And we were able to go out into the world and recruit students and say, we can give you up to $20,000 a semester for 4 years if you choose to come to Tennessee State University. Everybody's not able to do that, but that was the creative genius that our president said, okay, I'm tired of you asking me for money. Take this money and you better increase our international student enrollment. It wasn't as easy as everybody thought it was, because again, when we're out there competing with the PWIs with the same pot of students, it makes it very difficult. We entered into some agent agreements, and I know a lot of people don't like agent agreements, but we went after agents who, one, didn't want money ahead of time, and two, who were willing to accept like only 9%, and then the students didn't have to pay, or we didn't have to pay until the students paid in full. So again, those were some of the creative things that we had to come up with. We had to develop an international student recruitment plan. We had to get people to join us as a committee to make sure that there weren't any gaps in our recruitment efforts. We incentivized faculty. So with that pot of money that we get, if an international faculty decides they want to go home to recruit, then we pay half of their airfare. But there is some structure to that. Like there's a certain number of students that they have to meet with. They have to send us a list of the students that they meet with. So there's some structure to that. And it has been helpful. We have a faculty member from Jamaica. So we got a lot of students that enrolled from Jamaica. We have faculty members from Nigeria, Tanzania, just all over the place. And that has become very popular. Our Fulbrighters, faculty members that are going out on Fulbright, we're trying to incentivize them as well. So they're going out and helping us to get MOUs with other universities. So now we have probably almost 50 MOUs with various institutions and agencies and organizations. We don't just enter into agreements with universities. We do NGOs, we do government agencies, embassies, and things like that. So there's a wealth of resources out there to help us as HBCUs. We just got to be willing to reach out and ask. I don't take no very well, so I'm very persistent. I make sure that I get on committees like the White House Initiative on HBCUs International Committee. I currently serve as the president of AIEA, the Association for International Education Administrators. If we are not at the table, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the menu. So we must learn to force our way into spaces that we've not traditionally been in, because our voices need to be heard. And if our voices are not heard, then our voices are not respected and our voices are not, our concerns are not addressed, which is why I'm so excited about Tania's research. Another thing is that we have a passport office on campus. Mark Brinkley leads that initiative. So we were trying to find ways to have revenue, right? So again, I don't take no for an answer. So I'm like, how can we generate more money? So we all got trained. All of us became passport agents. So everybody in Nashville can come to our campus and get their passport. Another thing so the money that we generate from that, it's a $35 facility fee. We keep that. So Mark takes that money and does what? He puts it back into the fund to help students, help the students pay for the grants that they need to go study abroad. We also started an intensive English center. We are the only accredited intensive English center in the state of Tennessee. The pandemic shut down everybody else. So now our numbers are through the roof. It's self-sustaining. So we have to generate all of our own revenue and is very, very, very popular. So that is another revenue generating tool that we have to help support the whole unit of international affairs. And it becomes a feeder. So when the students finish their intensive English, then they can go right into TSU and continue to matriculate. We also have what is called an undergraduate pathways program. So they can be enrolled in the intensive English center and also be enrolled into gen ed classes. And when they finish, then they're automatically enrolled into the school. So again, when you have a centralized office of international affairs, that is a way for you to be really creative, get faculty buy-in. Because I have a faculty line, I can get to the faculty and convince them of some things and tell them how important it is for them to work with us. And they love that. This year, through our efforts, our recruitment efforts, we were able to get 600 new international student applicants, 600. But because the university didn't have the infrastructure in place to accommodate all of that, plus I'm sure you all seen TSU on the news, 3,500 other new applicants, a lot of them fell through the cracks. So of the 600 applicants that we had, about 132, it translated into about 132 new enrollees. So again, some things are happening at higher levels that we need to be in tune with. I know Tania is right there in Washington, so I hope she has her ear to the grind. But being a part of the White House Initiative on HBCUs, being a part of Fulbright, being a part of AIEA, connecting to some of these organizations that are having conversations that we're not privy to. I'm a part of the Women's Executive Council for ACE, so I know the conversations that Ted Mitchell is having about how he and ACE and the Carnegie Group are changing the criteria for classifications, because everything that they have been looking at to categorize people in the Carnegie classifications would have left HBCUs out of the conversation. So now they're changing that criteria. So again, we can be at the table and not always on the menu. I think, one other thing that we do have are global ambassadors. So we use domestic students and international students to help us move our vision forward on campus. And they're uber excited about working together, learning each other's culture, doing things together. And I'm sure all of you all are doing the same things. We dance together, we eat together. And there are two things in common that we all have, no matter where you are in the world, and that's music and food. If you can feed me and you can dance with me, then hey, we got something going on. So I'm going to yield now to, I guess, the next thing on the agenda and be quiet and see if we have any questions. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you so much, Joel. Really, really appreciate all the work that you've been doing and that you were able to share with us, with some great ideas in there for sure. And so next, I'm actually going to present just a little bit on some of the work that we've been doing here at Prairie View. And if I can just share my screen really quickly here, I think we're good to go on that end. Yeah, there's just a few things, projects that I've been working on that I want to make sure that other folks are aware of, so that you all also have the opportunity to put your university's names in the hat or in the bucket, so to speak, and and tap into some of the resources that are out there and available to us, particularly at the HBCUs, where we're typically, I think in many cases, we're expected, or rather the granting organizations are looking for us to submit applications. And sometimes I think maybe enough of us don't know about the information, or have a advance notice that these call for proposals and things like that are out there. So, but first I just want to touch on briefly Prairie View, just a little bit of background. This picture here is actually a group of freshman students that was taken just a few weeks ago. And so they're actually in Houston. Many of you may know Houston is one of the most diverse cities in the nation. But this Be Global program is really focused on internationalization. And so we recognize that all of our students will not be able to study abroad by the time they graduate, but we're being very intentional about exposing them to the diverse community that exists on our campus and around our campus. And so that we actually took them on a field trip to a Hindu temple, and they got to experience that and have a tour there, and then also have a lunch at an Indian restaurant as well. And so even though sometimes mobility is a challenge for us, I think we just need to also be creative, in a sense that sometimes there's things just down the street for us, or around the corner, that we can tap into and make sure that our students are still getting these international experiences. But real quick, just a little bit about Prairie View. We're located in Prairie View, Texas. Again, that's about 45 minutes from the city of Houston. Founded in 1876, and we've got approximately 9,000 students. Of that population, international students make up about 250 students for us. I think Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, and the Bahamas are some of the most prevalent student bodies, international student bodies that we have here. And then last year, 2021 to 2022, kind of coming out of the COVID rebound, if you will, we had about 60 students study abroad, primarily mostly on faculty-led programs, but I think maybe about 20% of those students did do transfer credit programs, like during the summer. And 60 students is about half of what we were doing pre-pandemic. And so our hope is that this year, going forward into 2023, we'll be able to get back to those pre-pandemic numbers, if not exceed them. And so Jewel also talked about passports. And so I wanted to highlight the IIE American Passport Project. IIE is the Institute of International Education, for those who may not be familiar. But essentially they have a passport project where they select 40 institutions annually to receive this grant, which helps fund passports for 25 Pell eligible freshman students. And so the idea is that if we target the freshman students, they'll have 4 years, at least 4 years, to hopefully be able to study abroad with those passports before they graduate. One of the caveats about this opportunity is that you must be an IIE institutional member. And I think that membership is about right at about $400. We actually renewed our membership last year specifically to apply for this grant. Everything that I apply for, I presume I'm getting it. I presume it's in the bag. And so that's kind of the strategy or approach we took to that. And so ultimately we did receive the grant from IIE. And so I've been nominating students and working on getting their passports for them. We take their photos, we help them fill out the application, we provide the money orders, make their copies of their birth certificates and IDs and all of that, and coordinate with the post office. We actually have a post office on our campus that processes passport applications for us. And so we've been working with them. But some other HBCUs who've also received this grant recently are Alcorn State, Harris Stowe, and Xavier University. And so if we've got some HBCUs on the line who haven't tapped into this opportunity, I really want to encourage you all to do so. And lastly, on this note, I'll mention that our president and also our provost essentially matched this grant for us. And so reached out to them, let them know that we had a grant for 25 of our students. And, you know, we wanted to be able to expand that. And so the provost gave us money for about another 25 students. And our president gave us money for an additional 50. And so altogether, we're helping about 100 students get their passports to study abroad. And so really looking forward to seeing them get their first stamp and see how they mature once they return back to campus. And then this here is just some statistics from IIE on the student populations that we're targeting with these grants. And you can see we're talking about students with financial need, racial, ethnic minorities, first-gen students, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera here. And so this is kind of what I was getting at in terms of these opportunities, these grant opportunities, these RFPs. They're looking for HBCUs and MSIs specifically so that they can diversify essentially their internationalization efforts. And so just really want to make sure that we're tapped in and at the table and applying for and receiving these opportunities. And so the next one I want to talk about is the Ideas Study Abroad Capacity Building Grant. I was also a recent recipient of this one as well. And I think it was 2020. Now these years are running together for me at this point, but we applied for a no-cost extension. So we've been working on this one for 2 years or about a year and a half now. We've got about another 6 months to bring it to fruition. But I'll start by saying this application is currently open again. They now have separated the application into 2 phases. And so the first phase, the deadline that's upcoming is December 16th. It's a much shorter phase where you just kind of have to submit a bit of like an abstract and just a little bit about your idea. And they'll review that information and have some finalists. They'll notify some finalists, probably I think it's January or February, and invite you to submit your final proposal for your project. And so again, highly encourage you all to apply for this one as well. Again, this is the Ideas Study Abroad Capacity Building Grant. For our project at Prairie View, it's focused on, rather the title of our project is Agribusiness in the Bahamas, a Study Abroad Pathway. And so one of the things that I've recognized in the time that I've been here at Prairie View working in the International Programs Office is timing is everything. Timing is key. Essentially, we can't be promoting study abroad opportunities or traditional study abroad opportunities to students who are graduating this semester, basically. And so the idea here is to basically inform our students and their parents as early as possible. We're talking about it, new student orientation, the summer bridge programs. We're tapping in with them and letting them know that there are, in this case, specific courses for students in the College of Agriculture as well as the College of Business, namely the Innovation of Entrepreneurship course and the Food Distribution Systems course, that they can take as sophomores or juniors. And these courses have study abroad components built into them. So again, this is a short-term faculty-led experience, but the idea is that if we're able to introduce them in that kind of in that sweet spot as a sophomore or early junior, then they'll also have time to maybe go back and do a full semester abroad or intern abroad with some of the connections that we're making in the Bahamas at the University of the Bahamas or the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute. And then there's also, because this is focused on entrepreneurship, economic development, we're also tapped in with a number of different businesses and entrepreneurs there who are working in the agriculture space and tackling some of the challenges around food security and food distribution. Be that the Bahamas is an archipelago, it's much more difficult for them to just pack a bunch of food in an 18-wheeler and put it on the highway because they've got to, transport from island to island, essentially. And so this is kind of the focus of our faculty-led program that our students from those two different areas will be participating in. Currently, we've got about 15 students who are signed up to participate in this program. The travel component will be during spring break this upcoming March. And so I look forward to sharing more information on how that turns out with you all in the future. And these are just some of the photos that we took. We recently traveled in August with the professors for a site visit to the Bahamas and connected with a entrepreneur out there who works in the agriculture space and was able to introduce us to a lot of different people on the ground who we look forward to going back and visiting and having our students participate with them. And so you can see we're at a couple farms where they're growing everything from bananas, coconuts, leafy greens via hydroponics, and also raising chickens as well. And then lastly, I want to talk about the Go Columbia project with CCYK, which is the Columbia Challenge Your Knowledge Network. This is a nonprofit network of 31 different universities in Columbia, who are essentially, their mission is to promote Columbia as an international destination for us. And I recently traveled there just about a month ago. I was there for 2 weeks with Shamika Reed, pictured here in the pictures with me. Formerly from, she worked at Jackson State and is also an alum of Jackson State, but now she runs a nonprofit organization called Global Gateways. She's traveling today, so she couldn't be with us on the call, but we got to visit a number of different universities in Cali, as well as Manizales and Prairie, and a little north of Cali. And the schools there, we visited about 10 different schools, and they were all extremely, extremely, extremely impressive, and kind of made us question, like, are we even doing some of this work with the resources that we have in the States? Just had a lot of really impressive labs and laboratories and things that they're doing as well in the internationalization space. And so they're very interested in establishing exchange partnerships with HBCUs and other schools as well. We visited 3 different regions, or rather, there was 3 different groups of us who went to these regions. Me and Shamika did the Valle de Cacao and the coffee region. And so again, this photo here is at the University of Prairie with the president and some of the international staff. But one thing that's really attractive about Columbia is the dollar is really strong right now, and it's strong against a lot of the currencies. But right now in Columbia, it's a very affordable destination for our students to run study abroad programs there. And again, they're very interested in working with HBCUs. And so what I'm going to do is I'll be sending out a live Google Sheet for anyone who's interested in connecting with some of the partners in Columbia to just kind of list your information, your name, your email, contact info, and what school you're at, and probably some of the areas, the academic areas that your school may have an interest with in partnering with some of the schools in Columbia, and see if we can make some connections that way. And so that really is kind of some of the different opportunities, again, that we've been working on here at Prairie View, and that I wanted to make sure that all of our HBCU partners and schools are aware of and are able to tap into. And at this point, this kind of concludes my presentation. And so I would like to first, again, thank all the panelists, Jewel Wynn, as well as Tania Hope. I also want to give a shout out to Kathy Strohmeyer from Mississippi Valley State, who helped kind of put this together. And again, Mr. Brian Smith from LewerMark, who sponsored this this event for us. And at this point, if anybody has any questions about anything that they saw or heard here today, I think now would be a good time to kind of throw it out there and open the floor for discussion. We've got about 10 more minutes. Don't be shy.
Marcus, I did want to remind everybody to check the chat. Athena from Fulbright put some information in there. I put some information in about AIEA, and Tania just put some information in as well. We need to use our resources that are made available to us. The State Department has some great programs through the Cultural and Educational Bureau. So again, sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and we need to just try to reach out to those people, those high-level officials that can help us, because there's money out there. When I heard today the amount of grant funding that's being given to UT, the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, which is, I'm collaborating with them, they're talking 30 million, 20 million, 10 million, 5 million. I'm like, what? Why are we not doing this? And so we just gotta get out of our comfort zone and just ask. Just start asking people, where is the money? Help me go get the money. And we can get it, but we may have to partner or collaborate with someone. I have no shame. I don't mind doing that. But they just dropping 30 millions of dollars like it's just nothing. Oh, well, you know, we can't even spend all 6 million of these dollars. Like, come on, really? So we got work to do, guys. We've got work to do. There's a special rate for HBCUs at AIEA. There's a wealth of resources. Tania and I serve on the board. Where'd it go? Torian Lee was on the board before. There's just many, 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 many resources out there to help us, but we've got to reach out for the help.
Thanks, Jewel. I note too, I think there's another webinar next week for the White House Initiative on HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
And can anybody speak to that by chance?
I don't have the link. I got it on my email today, though. Let me see. I think it's December 7th.
See if I can pull it up.
Yes, December 7th, 1 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be virtual. It is free to attend, and the audience is for students and staff of HBCUs. So just want you all to be aware of that as well. Again, this is a webinar series for the International Affairs Cluster of the White House Initiative on HBCUs. And we'll see if we can get a link in the chat for you all on that.
Also, you guys go to ICEF. They're having a free webinar next week on connecting you to scholarship agencies, agencies that provide money to send students to your institutions. Money to send students to your institutions. So look up ICEF and register for the free webinar that's coming up. I can't keep any dates in my mind. Next week sometimes.
And also, if you all didn't hear about this webinar through the HBCU International Initiatives group chat that we have, you should get in the group chat, because I know we started a group chat on GroupMe several years ago, and it was created with the intent to quickly share information amongst us at HBCUs, because some people, we had a listserv, an email, and sometimes that's a little too clunky to get to really quickly. And if something comes up, you just want to share it really fast, and you can do it from your phone. So if you're not in the GroupMe, please send us a message and say you want to be in the GroupMe. And then those of us who are in the GroupMe, I would remind you that we have it and we should use it. I know when we created it, we used it regularly. I think it has gotten a little quiet recently, but to Jules' point, there's so much out there and we need to be sharing it with each other because there is more than enough for us all to get stuff done. And so, and some of us, I don't think Marcus mentioned the 100,000 Strong in the Americas program, which is another State Department program out of ECA. We won that last year, and we just finished that. Actually, we partner with 2 universities in Columbia as well, and I sent 10 Howard students to Columbia in May, and we received students from the 2 universities in Columbia here in September, and it was called Diaspora Connect. It was they did a virtual language exchange for the academic year, and then we sent them to the other country so that they can meet each other. They were partnered with students, from the other country, and it was a great program, and it wasn't a lot of money, so I will say that. However, I have been told that as a result of the Summit of the Americas and the desire to increase more collaboration and exchange between the US and Latin America, that they're going to be increasing the amount of funding that's available through the 100,000 Strong program. So it's not going to be like these millions of dollars, but it's a good start, and maybe tap into some junior faculty who want to put some things on their resume and get them to write some grants to access that money is a good option.
Right, and you all stay tuned too, because there's a group, I think Dr. Beverly Amah is on here, and the chair, Mark Brinkley, is you'll start hearing information about the 100,000 Strong on the continent in Africa. So just stay tuned to that. So when you hear something like that, read your emails, look and see, because the group is preparing to submit a proposal very soon to the State Department to start, hopefully, a 100,000 Strong on the continent fund so that we can start sending our students home. So just look for that. A lot of work is being done behind the scenes with Dr. Amah and an outstanding team, which is now being chaired by Mark Brinkley of Tennessee State University. So look forward to hearing more about that. It's HAEC, Hayek. So when you see Hayek, check that email, because there's some interesting information that's going to be shared about that initiative.
Another data point that I wanted to drop for your consideration, and I wanted to especially share this with those of you who represent study abroad providers. In the session that Jewel chaired at the White House Initiative Conference, IIE shared a slide that showed the number of Black students that study abroad at PWIs versus HBCUs. And we all know the numbers are low. Before the pandemic, it was 6.4% of the students that study abroad were Black. It's obviously lower now because, COVID. But 94% of Black students who study abroad are from HBCUs, which means that PWIs are not doing their part with regard to getting Black students abroad. It is the HBCUs, per usual, punching well above their weight with not the resources that PWIs have. And so for the providers who, and remember, the other data that they shared was that HBCU students go to Western Europe less frequently than students from PWIs. So when we take all of this information and then we look at where providers closed their study abroad programs, they closed them, if they had them in the first place, in Africa. And Africa is where HBCU students go much more frequently than students at PWIs. So all of that to say, if you take the grand picture, and we are all so concerned about diversifying study abroad, and we're diversifying study abroad, and already the number of Black students that go abroad is low, and we know that the majority of Black students like to go to diverse destinations. then providers need to reconsider where it is that they closed their sites. And they need to consider Africa, they need to consider more Latin America and Caribbean, because that is where HBCU students go, 94% of whom are the Black students are from HBCUs who are going abroad. So I'm just going to drop that for consideration and reflection. And you can take that back to your leadership. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so
Sounds
much.
like a chastisement to me. I like it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Tania, Jewel, Kathy, Brian as well. We're just about at time, you all. So I want to give I want to thank you all for joining us today. We had an amazing crowd of about 46, 47 people who joined us. And I want to give one final big shout out to Brian Smith from LewerMark, again, for sponsoring this session. And Brian, if there's any final comments you want to leave us with, please feel free.
Yes, put some information about LewerMark in here in the chat. Feel free to reach out if you guys are open to get some additional information to see how we can better serve your students in regards to international student insurance. Thank you so much, Marcus, for the opportunity. It was a great session. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, y'all, there is a ton of information in the chat. I'm actually going to save that, and this has been recorded as well.